How many times have you felt overwhelmed by uncertainty, allowing it to take root in your heart and make you question God's presence and plan for your life? We all know that feeling the fear, the pain of not understanding why things are the way they are, the longing for answers, and the deep desire for peace. Maybe right now you're wrestling with feelings of inadequacy, unfulfilled dreams, or prayers that seem unanswered. Perhaps, in these silent battles you've wondered, is God really with me? In these moments of inner struggle, it's easy to feel disconnected from God, believing that your doubts disqualify you from His grace. But let me tell you something important. It is precisely those doubts that can become the doorways to a stronger, more intimate relationship with Him. As Hebrews 11 verse 6 reminds us, without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him. Faith is not the absence of doubt, but the decision to trust God in the midst of it. Today, I want to guide you through 7 profound truths that will not only help you confront and overcome these doubts, but will also enrich your understanding of God's Word, strengthen your faith, and nurture a deeper, more intimate connection with our Heavenly Father. I know that you are longing for peace in your heart, craving the kind of transformation that lifts you out of the pit of uncertainty and into the light of God's promises. We all seek this, a life filled with purpose, clarity, and the knowledge that God is guiding our steps. But this can only happen when we allow faith to replace fear, when we stop letting doubt dictate our lives, and instead let God's truth shape our journey. Trust that God hasn't forgotten you. Your pain, your struggles, and your doubts do not disqualify you from His love. They are the very areas where He can work His greatest miracles. So, I invite you to stay with me as we delve into these 7 life-changing truths. Let this message be the turning point where your faith deepens and your doubts dissolve. Before we continue, please take a moment to like this message and leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, your questions, or your prayers, because we are in this journey of faith together, and God's transformation begins with community. Let's move forward, step by step, trusting that God will meet us exactly where we are and lead us to where we are meant to be. Can I get an amen from you? C.S. Lewis, in his deep reflections on human nature, often spoke of the inner conflict that we all face. No man knows how bad he is till he has tried very hard to be good. How often do you feel that tug of war inside you? That feeling where one part of you wants to live righteously, while another part is pulled towards temptation, distraction, or even despair. This internal battle, the division within ourselves, is something we all know too well. You might wake up with the best intentions to change, to be kinder, more patient, more faithful, but then the day unfolds and old habits creep in. It feels as though you are 2 different people, each fighting to control your heart, your actions, and your thoughts. This constant battle within us often becomes the root of our deepest sorrows and failures. We aim to do good, but our weaknesses pull us in the opposite direction, leaving us fragmented and restless. Lewis tells us that this division is what saddens us most, for it keeps us from living fully in alignment with God's will. But what if this internal war didn't have to define us? What if there was a way to bring these conflicting parts of ourselves into harmony? What happens when we stop living in the tension between who we are and who we want to be, and instead fully surrender to God's transforming power? The moment we let go of doubt and fear and fully yield to God's love is the moment our fragmented selves begin to heal. It's like stepping out of a storm into a calm, where all the pieces of who we are, our hopes, our fears, our struggles finally come together in peace. Lewis reminds us that surrendering to God isn't about losing ourselves, but rather about becoming fully whole, as God intended. It is in this surrender that an inner transformation occurs. What once felt impossible, the ability to truly change, to live with purpose, to overcome our sins, suddenly becomes possible. The fears that once held us captive start to dissolve, replaced by a peace and joy that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. But this transformation isn't passive. It requires something from us. It asks us to let go of the need to control every part of our lives and trust in God's plan. So, I ask you, what would your life look like if you stopped holding on to the fragmented pieces and allowed God to weave them together into something beautiful? What if, instead of striving in your own strength, you surrendered and let Him lead you into wholeness? C.S. Lewis once said, "Relying on God has to begin all over again every day, as if nothing had yet been done." Have you ever felt that despite your best efforts, life continues to pull you into cycles of fear, doubt, and confusion? Perhaps you've experienced moments where your spirit was heavy with restlessness, longing for peace but unsure how to find it. Deep down, there's a yearning to be free from the chains of despair and to see the world through a different lens, one filled with purpose, hope, and clarity. You wonder, can God truly transform a life that feels broken beyond repair? It is in these moments of questioning that God's grace works most powerfully. When we begin to trust Him, not just in fleeting moments, but fully, a profound shift happens in our hearts. Our vision changes, and we start to see life from an entirely new and elevated perspective. Those things that once consumed our minds, our selfish ambitions, worldly concerns, and constant striving, begin to fade. In their place grows a desire, almost like a fire, to serve God and others with all that we have. It's as if God's love, once a distant concept, becomes a living, breathing force within us, overflowing into every relationship, every action, and every thought. But let's be real, doubt and fear have been companions for too long. They whisper lies that tell you you're not worthy, that transformation is for others but not for you. Yet, the miracle is that when you stop letting doubt control your life and surrender it to God, you experience something nothing short of miraculous. As C.S. Lewis so beautifully illustrates in Mere Christianity, the Christian does not think God will love us because we are good, but that God will make us good because He loves us. We are no longer slaves to our past desires, failures, or weaknesses. Instead, we are filled with the power of the Holy Spirit, and it's this divine strength that carries us forward, not our own. Imagine every decision, every action, every thought being guided by a wisdom greater than your own. This isn't a distant dream, it's the reality of a life transformed by God's love. A life where courage and faith replace fear and doubt. A life where you are not merely surviving but thriving, with a heart that radiates the love and truth of God to everyone around you. Are you ready to embrace that kind of transformation? To let go of the restlessness and allow God to reshape your heart and mind? The journey begins when you say yes to trusting Him fully. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "There are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind, but have you ever stood at a crossroads in your life, gripped by fear and uncertainty, feeling the weight of indecision? Maybe you're there now, wrestling with doubt and wondering if you can truly trust the unknown path before you. It's easy to cling to what is familiar, even when that familiarity brings no peace or fulfillment. Deep inside, there's a longing, a desire for something more. Something greater than the routine existence of doubt and confusion. But can you trust God enough to take that first step into the unknown, even when it feels risky? This is where faith meets reality. The life that God offers is not one of stagnation, but of transformation, a life filled with inner unity, unshakable peace, and a joy that transcends circumstances. As C.S. Lewis reminds us, we may ignore, but we can nowhere evade the presence of God. The world is crowded with Him. When we stop doubting and fully trust in Him, we begin to see that the life He offers is one of purpose, meaning, and deep communion with our Creator. This is not a fleeting joy tied to the ups and downs of life, but a steady assurance rooted in His infinite love. Imagine what your life could look like if you let go of the need for control and trusted in God's guidance. What if, instead of clinging to the familiar path, you chose the one less traveled, the one that may be filled with uncertainties but promises a future anchored in faith? At this point, you may feel the pull to take that leap, but doubt creeps in like a shadow. It clouds your thoughts, whispering questions. What if I fail? What if I've misunderstood God's plan? But this is where James 1 verse 6 calls us to step out in faith, reminding us, "But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind." The truth is, doubt will always try to keep you where it feels safe. It's a web that traps you, feeding your fears and making you question every decision. But God calls you to something deeper, to trust that He is with you even when the path ahead is unclear. Proverbs 3 verse 5 to 6 teaches us to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. When we surrender to God, we open ourselves to His divine wisdom, allowing Him to guide us in ways we couldn't have imagined. Have you ever noticed that the moments of greatest growth in your life were the ones where you once were where you were forced to lean entirely on God? The same is true now. Yes, the road ahead might be uncertain, but isn't there a part of you that feels the nudge of God, inviting you to trust Him more deeply than you ever have before? Maybe you've been questioning whether God is really there in your struggles. You wonder if the challenges you face will ever have a resolution. Isaiah 41 verse 10 offers us this assurance. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." These words are not just a comforting sentiment, they are divine promises. God is not only with you, but actively working in your life. Even in the moments when you feel lost or uncertain, you are not alone at this crossroads. He is with you, guiding your steps, holding you steady when doubt tries to sway you. So, my dear friend, I encourage you to reflect deeply on where you are today. Are you standing at a crossroads, afraid to move forward? Remember, God has promised to be with you on this journey. He is offering you a life transformed by faith, a life where doubt and fear no longer hold you captive. Take the path that leads to Him, trusting that His hand will guide you, His love will sustain you, and His wisdom will direct every step you take. There is more ahead than you could ever imagine if only you trust Him with all your heart. C.S. Lewis wrote, "I am sure that God keeps no one waiting unless He sees that it is good for him to wait." Have you ever found yourself wondering why God seems silent when you need Him most? You've prayed, hoped, and trusted, yet the answer you're seeking doesn't come when you expect it. In these moments, doubt and fear creep in, whispering lies about God's faithfulness and leaving you feeling abandoned. The pain of waiting can be overwhelming, especially when it feels like God is not paying attention to your struggles. But what if the waiting itself is part of God's plan for your transformation? In times of doubt, it's essential to remember that God is not a distant observer. He is intricately involved in every detail of our lives. Even when it feels like nothing is happening, He promises in Isaiah 41 verse 10 to strengthen you, help you, and uphold you with His righteous right hand. This promise becomes our anchor when uncertainty invades our hearts, reminding us that God's silence is not His absence. Like the story of Lazarus in John 11, where Jesus intentionally delayed His visit after Lazarus fell ill, we learn that divine delays often carry greater purposes than we can perceive. Martha, grieving over her brother's death, questioned Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." But Jesus' delay was not an oversight. It was a preparation for a miracle that would reveal His glory in a far more profound way than healing Lazarus before his death ever could have. So often in life, when God doesn't act according to our timeline, we rush to doubt His plans. We forget that His timing, though different from ours, is perfect. Lewis once said, "God never wastes the suffering of His children. He always uses it for a greater purpose." This truth is hard to accept when we're in the middle of our pain. But the waiting period is not wasted time. It's in this space between our prayers and God's answers that faith grows. Our hearts are refined, and God is working out a greater purpose behind the scenes. Have you been struggling with your own Lazarus moment, wondering why God has delayed in responding to your deepest needs? Could it be that He is preparing something greater for you, something that goes beyond your immediate desire? As hard as it is, the waiting could be God's way of setting the stage for a greater blessing, one that will not only answer your prayers but glorify His name in ways you can't yet imagine. The test of faith in these moments is not just about believing in the miracle but trusting in God's timing. Let us remember the words of Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1. "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens." The delays we experience are often divine appointments in disguise, carefully arranged by God for His glory and our ultimate good. Instead of rushing through the waiting, embrace it as part of God's perfect plan. For in that waiting, He is shaping us, preparing us, and drawing us into deeper trust and communion with Him. As Jesus said to Martha in John 11 verse 40, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" When the weight of doubt presses in and the waiting seems unbearable, let us rest in the assurance that God is working in ways far beyond our understanding. His timing is flawless, and His purpose for your life is unfolding exactly as it should, even when it feels delayed. Hold on to this truth: the miracle is coming, and in that waiting, God is drawing you closer to His heart, preparing you for the greater glory He will reveal in your life. C.S. Lewis once said, "Hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny." Have you ever wondered why God seems to delay when you're in the middle of your greatest struggles? The waiting, the uncertainty, it can feel overwhelming. And sometimes we ask, why does God make us wait when we need Him most? In these moments, it's easy to lose hope, to feel as though our prayers are left unheard. But what if these delays and trials are not a sign of God's absence, but rather His intricate craftsmanship at work in your life? What if every struggle is a brushstroke on the masterpiece He is creating with your story? Let's take a step back and consider the story of Lazarus. When Jesus delayed His arrival, it seemed as though all hope was lost. But in that moment of despair, Jesus wasn't neglecting his beloved friend. He was setting the stage for something far greater, a miracle that would strengthen the faith of many. As 2 Peter 3 verse 8-9 reminds us, with the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise. God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with our own. What feels like a delay is often a divine setup for something extraordinary. And what about those trials that seem to never end? Lewis profoundly observed, God is not interested in our comfort, but in our character. Could be that these trials are the very tools God uses to refine us. Like Joseph, who was betrayed by his brothers, falsely accused, and imprisoned, his suffering wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Through those hardships, Joseph was transformed, molded into a man who would eventually save nations. Just as James 1 verse 2-3 teaches, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. In the midst of your struggles, have you ever stopped to ask, what is God shaping me to become, rather than asking, why is this happening to me? Perhaps the real question should be, Lord, what are you preparing me for? Trials are not meant to break you, but to build you. They refine you into the person God has destined you to be, much like gold refined by fire. As 1 Peter 1 verse 6-7 says, it's not easy, but it is in these very moments of pain, of waiting, and of questioning that your faith is strengthened and your character developed. So, my dear friends, when life becomes unbearable and doubt begins to creep into your heart, remember that this very moment might be the training ground for something greater than you can imagine. God is not just writing a story, he's crafting a masterpiece with your life, full of purpose and divine beauty. As Genesis 50 verse 20 reminds us, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. Your trials today could very well be the seeds of tomorrow's triumphs. Let us therefore not shrink in fear or doubt, but stand in faith, trusting that God is using every trial, every delay, for our ultimate good and his eternal glory. C.S. Lewis once wrote, pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Have you ever felt that your suffering was so intense that it drowned out everything else, making you wonder if God is even aware of your anguish? Maybe you've questioned why, if God truly loves you, he allows you to endure such hardship. It's a question many of us face during the darkest nights of the soul, when it feels like we are crying out into an empty void. But the deeper truth is that God not only hears your cries, he is intimately involved in your suffering. The Bible tells us in Exodus 3 verse 7 that God heard the cries of the Israelites in Egypt, saying, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. The Israelites were not just slaves. They were a people in deep anguish, feeling forgotten and forsaken. Yet, God's concern was not passive. He took action, leading them out of their oppression and into the promised land. This historical account offers us a glimpse into the heart of God, a Father, who not only hears but also feels the pain of his children. Think about your own life. How often have you felt trapped by circumstances, weighed down by pain or despair, wondering if God even knows what you're going through? Maybe you've asked, why does it seem like my prayers are met with silence? But the truth is, God is not a distant observer. He is a compassionate Father who hears every cry, understands every tear, and walks with you through every valley. C.S. Lewis also noted that God allows us to suffer so that we may be purified and strengthened, so that our faith may grow just as he did with the Israelites. God is actively working through your trials, preparing you for a future you cannot yet see. When we are in the midst of suffering, it is easy to feel as though God is far away. But he is closer than ever. God sees your pain, and more importantly, he has a plan to bring you through it. The journey from pain to peace is often fraught with doubt, especially when we are impatient for resolution. Yet God's aim is not merely to remove our discomfort, but to use it as a furnace for refining our faith. In this furnace, the impurities of doubt, fear, and self-reliance are burned away, leaving a faith that is pure, resilient, and deeply rooted in God's love. My friends, I know it is hard to believe in God's goodness when you're shackled by pain, fear, or uncertainty. But it is in these very moments, in your personal Egypt, that God is closest to you, guiding you toward freedom. The one who delivered the Israelites from centuries of bondage is more than capable of delivering you from whatever chains you feel bound by. God is not indifferent to your suffering. He sees your pain. He feels it. and when the time is right, He will act on your behalf. So, take heart. As Psalm 34 verse 15 assures us, "The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and His ears are attentive to their cry. Your cry are not lost in the wind, and your pain has not gone unnoticed." God, in His perfect timing, will lead you from the valleys of doubt into the light of His peace. C.S. Lewis reminds us, "I pray because I can't help myself. I pray because I'm helpless. I pray because the need flows out of me all the time, waking and sleeping." It doesn't change God, it changes me. But how often do we treat prayer as a last-ditch effort, only reaching out to God when our circumstances seem beyond our control? Have you ever found yourself overwhelmed, wrestling with doubt, wondering if your prayers are even heard? Deep inside, you may carry the burden of unspoken fears about your health, relationships, finances, or future. These worries have a way of silently gripping our hearts, leaving us paralyzed, desperate for relief. Yet the beauty of prayer lies in its ability to transform not just our circumstances, but our very hearts. When we come before God in prayer, something shifts. It's not always about changing the external world around us, but more about reshaping the world within. Take the story of Daniel, for example. Thrown into the lion's den because of his unwavering devotion to God, Daniel's prayers didn't change the threat of the lions, but they did invite God's protection into his circumstances. As Daniel 6 verse 22 recounts, "My God sent His angel, and He shut the mouths of the lions." What was the secret behind Daniel's courage? It was his life of consistent, unceasing prayer, a direct connection with God that allowed him to face even the most terrifying situations with unwavering trust. But let's be honest, prayer is often hard when doubt clouds our hearts. When we don't see immediate results, it's easy to question, is God really listening yet? James 1 verse 6 challenges us. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. Prayer requires faith. It is the moment where we surrender, where we say, "God, I trust you, even when I cannot see the outcome." Just as Lewis said, prayer changes us. It opens us up to the divine power of God, a power that can shut the mouths of the lions in our own lives, whether those lions are fears, uncertainties, or personal battles. What would it look like to truly live this way? To bring every anxiety, every fear to God in prayer. It's not about following a formula or finding the perfect words. It's about opening your heart and trusting that God hears you. As Psalm 28 verse 7 declares, "The Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in Him, and He helps me." This trust is what transforms our doubt into faith, our fear into strength. So, the next time you find yourself overwhelmed with doubt, kneel in prayer. And remember, prayer is not about the formality of the words or the posture. It is about the heart reaching out to the Creator, inviting Him into every corner of your life. Whether you're on your knees sitting quietly or whispering a prayer in the chaos of your day, know this: when you pray, you are not alone. You are aligning yourself with God's promises and tapping into a power far greater than your circumstances. Allow prayer to change not just your situation, but your heart, and you will find that it is one of the most powerful things you can do. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "We are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us. We are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be." How often do you find yourself questioning the twists and turns of life, feeling as though your plans are crumbling while desperately clinging to control? We make plans with such confidence, believing we know what is best, yet deep inside, there is a nagging fear. What if God's plans lead us through pain, disappointment, or loss? When we face setbacks, it's easy to feel like God isn't listening, or His plans don't align with our desires. Have you felt this before? Disillusioned, frustrated, wondering if He sees your struggles? But here's a truth that can set your heart at peace. God's plans far exceed our own understanding. Isaiah 55 verse 9 reminds us, "As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." When we consider this, we begin to grasp that God's design for our lives isn't bound by our limited perspective. His plans stretch far beyond what we can imagine. Think of the Israelites waiting for their Messiah. They expected a conquering king, but God sent a humble servant in Jesus Christ. His plan, though different from human expectations, brought about the salvation of humanity. What they couldn't see at the time was that God's way, though unexpected, was infinitely better. When we encounter delays, failures, or detours, it's natural to feel disheartened. We wonder, Why aren't things going according to our schedule? Yet Lewis insightfully reminds us that God always uses suffering for a greater purpose. Our disappointments can often be divine appointments in disguise, preparing us for something we could never have envisioned. Can you recall moments in your life where the struggle seemed unbearable, only to realize later that it was those very challenges that shaped your character or deepened your faith? God is masterfully crafting your life story, even when it doesn't make sense to you in the moment. Our limited human imagination can only conceive of so much. If God's plans were confined by our understanding, they would be filled with flaws and missed opportunities. But instead, His plans are perfect and eternal, designed not for fleeting happiness, but for lasting joy and divine purpose. It's in those moments of surrender when we release our grip on our small, fragile plans that we open ourselves to the infinite possibilities God has for us. The truth is, God is not a mere servant to our desires or a bellhop to fulfill every request. He is our loving Father, committed to seeing His perfect will unfold in our lives. He knows exactly what will stretch us, grow us, and ultimately bring us to the fullness of who He created us to be. As Proverbs 16 verse 9 tells us, "In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." When we allow Him to guide us, we find that His path, though not always easy, leads to a destiny filled with His love, grace, and glory. So when your plans fall apart or life takes an unexpected turn, remember that God is not absent. He is carefully orchestrating a story that goes beyond your wildest dreams. He doesn't want to just give you a good life. He wants to give you a life rooted in divine purpose, one that reflects His glory, love, and eternal plans. Ephesians 3 verse 20-21 beautifully reminds us, "Now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us, to Him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen." Trust that the God who holds the stars also holds your future. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "We are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us. We are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be." How often do you find yourself questioning the twists and turns of life, feeling as though your plans are crumbling while desperately clinging to control? We make plans with such confidence, believing we know what is best, yet deep inside, there is a nagging fear: what if God's plans lead us through pain, disappointment, or loss? When we face setbacks, it's easy to feel like God isn't listening, or His plans don't align with our desires. Have you felt this before? Disillusioned, frustrated, wondering if He sees your struggles? But here's a truth that can set your heart at peace. God's plans far exceed our own understanding. Isaiah 55 verse 9 reminds us, "As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." When we consider this, we begin to grasp that God's design for our lives isn't bound by our limited perspective. His plans stretch far beyond what we can imagine. Think of the Israelites waiting for their Messiah. They expected a conquering king, but God sent a humble servant in Jesus Christ. His plan, though different from human expectations, brought about the salvation of humanity. What they couldn't see at the time was that God's way, though unexpected, was infinitely better. When we encounter delays, failures, or detours, it's natural to feel disheartened. We wonder, why aren't things going according to our schedule? Yet Lewis insightfully reminds us that God always uses suffering for a greater purpose. Our disappointments can often be divine appointments in disguise, preparing us for something we could never have envisioned. Can you recall moments in your life where the struggle seemed unbearable, only to realize later that it was those very challenges that shaped your character or deepened your faith? God is masterfully crafting your life story, even when it doesn't make sense to you in the moment. Our limited human imagination can only conceive of so much. If God's plans were confined by our understanding, they would be filled with flaws and missed opportunities. But instead, His plans are perfect and eternal, designed not for fleeting happiness, but for lasting joy and divine purpose. It's in those moments of surrender when we release our grip on our small, fragile plans that we open ourselves to the infinite possibilities God has for us. The truth is, God is not a mere servant to our desires or a bellhop to fulfill every request. He is our loving Father, committed to seeing His perfect will unfold in our lives. He knows exactly what will stretch us, grow us, and ultimately bring us to the fullness of who He created us to be. As Proverbs 16 verse 9 tells us, "In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps." When we allow Him to guide us, we find that His path, though not always easy, leads to a destiny filled with His love, grace, and glory. So when your plans fall apart or life takes an unexpected turn, Remember that God is not absent. He is carefully orchestrating a story that goes beyond your wildest dreams. He doesn't want to just give you a good life. He wants to give you a life rooted in divine purpose, one that reflects His glory, love, and eternal plans. Ephesians 3 verse 20 to 21 beautifully reminds us, "Now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us, to Him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever." Amen. Trust that the God who holds the stars also holds your future. C.S. Lewis beautifully captured the nature of God's love when he said, "Though our feelings come and go, God's love for us does not have you ever paused and wondered what it would mean to experience a love so complete, so perfect, that it could erase your deepest fears and calm your most crippling doubts." Many of us live with the heavy burden of feeling unworthy, battling internal voices that convince us we are too flawed for God's love. Perhaps you've questioned whether God truly cares for you, especially in your moments of weakness. You might ask yourself, how could a God, so holy and perfect, love someone as imperfect as me? But that's the beauty of God's love. It doesn't hinge on your perfection. Romans 5 verse 8 tells us, "But God demonstrates His own love for us in this, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." This divine love, unlike human love, does not waver or depend on conditions. It is a love that embraces you where you are, broken and weary, and promises to restore you. It's a love that removes the crippling doubt that keeps you from experiencing the fullness of God's grace. Imagine for a moment, if God was willing to sacrifice His only Son for you, would He not be faithful enough to walk with you through every trial, guiding you with His wisdom and bringing peace to your restless heart? This love is powerful. When you truly understand how vast and unchanging God's love is, it replaces the doubts that plague your mind. Hebrews 10 verse 23 reminds us, "Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for He who promised is faithful in His love." You find assurance. As you surrender to God's embrace, doubts about His plans and timing begin to fade, and you are left with a firm, unshakable confidence. Faith flourishes in a heart that rests in God's love, a love that casts out fear and fills the void with hope. But let's not ignore the battle we all face, doubt. It's a constant struggle, one that can creep into our lives during difficult seasons. However, we serve a God who is far greater than our doubts. He calls us to trust Him, even when the path ahead is unclear. From the resurrection of Lazarus to the trials of Joseph, and from the bondage of the Israelites to the courage of Daniel, God's message is clear. He will see us through. He will resolve what troubles us. His love is steadfast, His faithfulness unwavering, and He invites us to rest in that assurance. So today I encourage you to quiet your doubts, open your heart, and trust that God's love is enough. It is enough to heal, restore, and lead you through the uncertainty.